Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Jenkins, and I am thrilled to introduce the Newcomers series at the Greensboro Public Library. For this series, we've partnered with three vital community organizations: the Center for New North Carolinians at UNCG, the Church World Service, and FaithAction, to bring you a series of incredibly important panel discussions about our newest neighbors, the immigrant and refugee communities in the greater Greensboro area. We will be hosting 3 sessions on a variety of topics. The first session will delve into the pathways for citizenship, the myths and misconceptions around the immigration process, and how the COVID-19 crisis has affected these communities. Session 2 will focus on tools for building cultural competency, actionable everyday practices to foster greater understanding, trust, and cooperation across lines of culture and faith. In Session 3, we'll discuss some of the best practices and strategies of advocating for and with these communities, as well as different initiatives on the local and state immigration policy level. Of course, we would love for you to join us for each and every session in the Newcomers series, but each session can also be viewed as a standalone program. I have learned so much through these panel discussions, and I hope that you will too. If you would like to submit questions to our panelists for consideration, you can do so by finding the Newcomers series registration form on the Greensboro Public Library Facebook page or through the web address included at the end of each session. Thank you again for joining us, and please enjoy.
I'm Megan Shepard. I'm the Office Director for CWS Greensboro.
Hi, my name's Betsy Jensen. I am with the Center for New North Carolinians at UNCG, and I am the Immigration Services Manager.
Hi everyone, my name is Foon. I am one of the Education Advocacy Coordinators here at FaithAction International House.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yara Adra. I'm also one of the Education and Advocacy Coordinators at FaithAction.
So what kind of work do these organizations do? A little bit more specifically, how do you help the immigrant community in Greensboro? Megan, I'm going to start with you again.
Sure. So with the help of community partners, CWS Greensboro welcomes refugees and immigrants into lives of freedom, hope, and opportunity in our area, in the Triad, by equipping them with the skills and resources necessary to achieve long-term self-sufficiency and integration. We also provide, we do that through case management, employment services, immigration legal services, and ongoing education.
I guess I'll go next. The Center for New North Carolinians, our goal is to promote access and integration for immigrants and refugees in the Triad. We do that through providing direct services, doing research and training. So our direct services, we have centers that are based in largely immigrant, refugee communities, usually housing complexes that have a lot of immigrants and refugees. So we have community centers, which are a hub for a lot of community activities, English language classes, after school help for kids, a variety of things. So what I do is we have immigration services. So we help immigrants and refugees who need help filing for some sort of immigration benefits. And then we also have an interpreter access program where we partner primarily with CONE to provide interpretation services to help improve access for immigrants within the medical, the medical community.
So at FaithAction, we serve and advocate alongside thousands of newcomers each year, all while educating, connecting diverse communities across lines of culture and faith. And so to bring this mission to life, FaithAction is encompassed through three primary ways. So direct service, we have our our immigrant advisory committee, and they help more with direct services, whether it's food boxes, helping out with doc applications, whatever kinds of needs the community has. We try and meet them where they're at and help them in whatever way we can, but have wonderful community partners that we also rely on and are in community with so that we can fulfill the needs of those that are coming to FaithAction's door. We also have education, which is another primary way through trainings for both the newcomer community as well as receiving communities. And this would be our serving newcomers training, our stranger to neighbor training. And we also have our bridge building through our stranger to neighbor program. And for this particular program, we combine different congregations together, different communities that have various religious, ethnic, cultural diversity within their congregations, and bring them together on this, we call it a heart and mind journey to becoming neighbors. And I will leave Yaira any other details that I may have missed.
Well, yeah, that was perfectly put together, Foon. So while basically our role at FaithAction and how to turn strangers into neighbors is to reach out into our specific communities. So for example, I am Togolese, coming from West Africa. So I am a community outreach where I work more in the African community. So basically expose them to the FaithAction services that we provide, like the financial assistance, food boxes, or any other like legal needs, for example, just making sure they know of our examples of our services that we provide at FaithAction. And Foon also does that in the Southeast Asian community. So yeah, but that was very well put together, Foon. Thank you so much.
It definitely was. Thank you, all of you. So Yara, this brings me to my next question, which if you could give me and our audience kind of an idea of the makeup of the immigrant community. I don't expect you to have the exact statistics, but just sort of a general idea of what that community looks like.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I definitely don't have the exact statistics because it's like changing every day. Well, now, like, people are coming in left and right from different places of the world, especially into like Greensboro or North Carolina as an entirety, as a state. But just coming here at 8 years old and going to newcomer school, I can give you a very like a small overview of what I've seen of what the immigrant community looks like in Greensboro. So we have folks that come from all over the world. I've met people from Romania and Pakistan that I wouldn't have met anywhere else if it wasn't for newcomer school. And also when you like drive down on Gate City Boulevard, you see so many different stores like culture stores or grocery stores or clothing stores that are full of like people, folks that are coming from all different places of the world as well. So that gives like a little idea of the immigrant community. Or you see churches, you see religious centers. And also working from here, I can tell that the vast majority of the immigrants that are here are the majority are Latinx or Spanish speaking folks. And there's like a slim number of refugees or immigrants that are coming from Africa or Southeast Asia. But yeah, that's like an overview of the immigrant community for me.
I was just going to add to that. That was a really great summary. I think last time I checked, there were 112 something languages spoken in Guilford County schools,
Wow.
just in the school system alone. So I think that it really kind of encaptures just how diverse our community is. I did pull some statistics through some reports done through the New American Economy, and immigrant community makes up about 8.2% of the population in North Carolina. And in Greensboro, it's roughly 8.7% of the population, or in Guilford County. So it's fairly large. And, you know, as Yara mentioned, it's very diverse. People from Central and South America, different parts of Africa, Asia, even Europe. You know, Greensboro in particular has had a very long history of welcoming newcomers, dating back to over 40 years ago, with the kind of establishment of the refugee resettlement program, and starting with resettling Hmong and Montagnard refugees. And even within the refugee community, there's a lot of diversity, refugees coming from Democratic Republic of Congo, Bhutan, Burma, Sudan, other parts of Africa. So it is incredibly diverse, and I think kind of an essential part of our fabric and identity here.
I wanted to add just a little bit to that. Megan alluded to the Montagnard community, and I think one interesting thing about the triad is that, so the Montagnards, for those who don't know, are a community from Vietnam. They're from the mountainous region, and it's actually a number of different ethnic communities that are sort of all known under one umbrella as Montagnards, but there's actually quite a number of different communities within that who speak a number of different languages. But the triad has the largest population of Montagnards outside of Asia. And so the Montagnards were resettled here as refugees, largely because during Vietnam, they were essential in supporting American efforts in the war. And so after the United States pulled out of Vietnam, obviously they were they were persecuted for that assistance. And then through the years, they've continued to be persecuted for various reasons. The persecution of Montagnards has sort of lasted for decades in Vietnam. And Greensboro is the largest population outside of Asia, which I think is interesting and I don't know, makes Greensboro a little bit special.
Thanks so much, Betsy. That's really interesting. So what are some of the pathways people in the immigrant community to obtain citizenship, should they wish to? Are there more challenges, obstacles in that pathway, or fewer? Or
I think so. Immigration is a federal issue, and a lot of the times the options do depend on what's going on in Congress and what kind of federal laws we have for immigration. And it's also important to talk about, when we're talking about what are the pathways forward, that we kind of distinguish the different kinds of status that folks have, and oftentimes how arbitrary it is, because folks who have refugee status may already have a pathway forward. They may be already on the stepping stone or a ladder forward, whereas folks who are undocumented but may be coming from a war-torn country in Central America do not have a pathway forward. And so I think it's also important to talk about the misconceptions that there is a line available for undocumented immigrants, and that the regular channels are largely not available to prospective immigrants who end up entering the country through, the border in the South. If you do have papers, if you do already have status, you can apply for the green card and wait until you're able to apply for citizenship and take the test. And oftentimes there are more barriers because there's a cost. Oftentimes there's a language, you have to take the test in English, I believe, and it's also more than just a written exam. There's also a spoken part of the exam as well. And so the system is really it's particularly against folks who are undocumented, who have come here, for survival or a chance at a better life, or to reunite their family, a lot of the other reasons that other communities come here for, but it's just that they are not coming from a refugee country, a deemed refugee country, and so they have a more difficult time being able to obtain that status.
As Spoon implied, there should be an avenue for people fleeing war-torn countries to have that access that refugees are given, to have a pathway forward. So when refugees come, after they're here a year, they're able to apply for their green card. And then after they get their green card, they are able to apply for citizenship 5 years from the day that they arrived in the country. And so they have a very clear pathway. And asylees would have that same pathway. Like once they were granted asylum, they would be able to apply for a green card within 1 year and then be able to apply for citizenship within 5 years of the day they were granted asylum. And essentially the previous administration shut down the asylum program. I mean, they functionally ended it, and which is against international law, it's against US law. The Biden administration is working on fixing that, but there is a crisis at the border, and there is also the asylum system is overburdened. There's a huge backlog of cases. It incentivizes people to claim asylum when they aren't, actually fleeing persecution. Yeah, fleeing from something. So it incentivizes people to use it, I guess, fraudulently. Whereas if they were to fix that problem, then you could actually address the people who are truly in need of protection. So anyway, that's getting into a lot of weeds and a lot of detail, but I just think it's really important to say that there is a process for these people coming from the Northern Triangle. It's just that it was shut down by the Trump administration, and the public was really led to believe that these people were coming and breaking the law, and they were not. They were trying to exercise their right, both international and US right, to claim asylum. So,
because it has to have been over the past 5 years something like a form of whiplash in terms of the administrations that have the administrative paradigms on immigration. How does that change your day-to-day work? I mean, how does that change the picture of what you're able to do every day?
For the immigrant and refugee communities, I think a lot of people are feeling hopeful for the first time in years, hopeful that maybe they'll be able to be reunited with their family members, that because of policies at the federal level under the Trump administration, as Funa and Betsy mentioned, like many of those pathways were just, there was a lot of intention to destroy and close doors, shut doors, close our borders. And so it made it incredibly difficult for people to take advantage of pathways that are written into law. And so I think a lot of people are feeling really hopeful. It was written into law in 1980 under the Refugee Act. And historically, on average, the US would admit between like 85 and 95,000 refugees a year. The Trump administration set the refugee admissions cap to 15,000 this past year, 15,000 people. So it took a tremendous toll on many families that are already here, not to mention the, close to 30 million refugees, those who have been identified as by UNHCR, who are overseas waiting for some sort of solution. The resettlement program in particular has looked really different, as there just continue to be major cuts in the number of people being admitted and more families being separated for longer periods of time, with really no clear picture of when they'll be able to bring spouses and children and parents and siblings over to the US to join them, which they would have the right to do. So it's just really limited the access in that way. So I think the biggest change is kind of this promise of hope, and that things will begin to be restored and rebuilt. Is already looking to kind of start to restore the program and rebuild the program. But we're still waiting on a lot of things to happen at the federal level, which it leads me to believe that there's probably a lot more damage done within the immigration system than maybe the general public was aware of, and that I think we have a long road to really fully be able to restore things and correct the damage that had been done over the past few years.
Great.
I would add that we're seeing already, I would just reiterate what Megan was saying about hope. I started working in immigration law during the Trump administration, which was a really dark time to start working in that area. And I worked specifically in with refugees. And so I did a lot of refugee follow to join, where a refugee arrives and they left their spouse or children behind, and they're able to petition to bring that family member. And so I used to work at Elon Law, the humanitarian immigration law clinic there, and was working with clients who were just desperate for news on when they would be reunited with their families. And the Trump administration was really, really good at using administrative procedures, closures of offices and reorganizations of offices and all of these things, like a variety of things to just put barriers in place. And so what used to be like, take a year and a half for a family to be reunited. I mean, I worked with families in the 3 years I was at Elon and had not been reunited with their family and didn't really have any immediate hope of it. And so now there is hope for them. I know that the Biden administration has specifically talked about the refugee follow to join program and getting that back because they're really interested in reuniting families. There's hope that this administration cares about resolving the issues that we have in our immigration system.
Great. Thank you, Betsy. So, Foon, I think a little while ago, you had mentioned that there's some misconceptions around the immigration process. What are some of the misconceptions or the myths that you have heard about this community?
I think even just going beyond, pathways forward, there are countless numbers of myths and misconceptions that are fed to us through media, through public figures about immigrant and refugee communities, and none of them are particularly positive. A lot of these are negative stories being told, such as, immigrants are overrunning the US and a lot of them are here illegally, when in reality, immigrants have made up about the consistent amount of around 13.5% of the population at any given period of time in history. And most folks have come here with status, but again, I think it goes deep into the conversation of the way that immigration is criminalized and the ways that we choose to criminalize immigration for certain communities. I mean, other misconceptions are that immigrants bring violence and crime to our cities and towns. And again, this isn't, and when you're in reality, studies show that, immigrants, regardless of where they are from, what status that they have, and how much education that they have completed, are less likely than native-born citizens to commit crimes and become incarcerated. And so I think we need to kind of ask why there are these myths that are being fed when studies show that it's quite the opposite, and that immigrant communities bring lots of joy, lots of jobs, prosperity to communities, and really bring life to the cities that they are going into.
Speaking purely for myself, I feel like immigration gets a lot of headlines, but I don't actually know what it means in a way. And there's so much misinformation around immigration that I feel like it's really important to, as Fid said, interrogate those power structures and what really lies beneath them in terms of xenophobia and racism and the not in my backyard syndrome, when really.
One thing that we heard from the last administration was chain migration, and politicians saying, people bringing their aunts and uncles and cousins. And the reality is, yes, family immigration is the largest source of immigration to the United States. However, family immigration is very, very limited. You can, as a US citizen, you can bring your parents, you can petition for your children, you can petition for your siblings, but it's probably going to take 20 years for their turn to come. Mm-hmm. And then as a legal permanent resident, you can petition for your spouse or your under 21 children. And I mean, it's very limited. Another area that the Trump administration talked about getting rid of was the diversity visa, which is like a lottery for countries where we don't have as many people from those countries coming. They are eligible for the diversity lottery. And that they apply for the lottery. There are 50,000 names picked each year. They're then notified that they are eligible, but now they have to pass all of the hoop, jump through all of the hoops. We don't know the percentage that come, but it is not all of them. It takes quite a bit. And I have to say, just personally, one of the most impressive young men I know was a diversity visa lottery winner from Ghana who came here, went to New York, did not know a soul, found the Ghanaian community there, worked in a hotel while he took the LSAT, and then ended up applying to law school and graduated, and he's now a lawyer. There's even misconceptions about refugees. I've had, a lovely uncle who, when I was talking about refugees, made a comment about, well, they need to come here legally. And I'm like, by definition, refugees are here legally. They were flown here by the United States. I mean, there's a lot of misconception.
Just wanted to highlight the misconception with immigrants and crime, and how immigrants are criminals, and they bring like gang activities and whatnot into the country. We also have to look at the detention centers that were built for a lot of undocumented folks they are being detained at. And usually when you go into like this detention centers, which FaithAction has been doing for the past few years, you see some folks that are being detained for like little misdemeanors, like overstaying a visa. And this is being added to like the pool of like the demographics of immigrants are criminals. So I just want to add also that conception, and also looking into the different facts of why are these folks being detained? Why are these folks being arrested? So yeah, just wanted to add that there.
Yeah. Wondering if any of you wanted to speak towards whether or not immigration helps the economy or hurts the economy.
It helps a lot.
Yeah.
I do have some facts and figures to share. So in terms of how immigrants are contributing to the economy, and if we're looking just at the state of North Carolina, immigrants have paid over $7.7 billion in taxes. And in Guilford County, they've paid close to $430 million in taxes. They have a spending power of over $1.3 billion, and that's just in Guilford County. So, I mean, that's an enormous contribution to our local economy, to our state economy. I don't have the national figures, but I would imagine that it's even larger, right, than just looking at our state. In Guilford County, there's an estimated over 4,000 immigrant entrepreneurs. So they're establishing their own businesses, which is incredible. I think it's also important to note, and this isn't necessarily pertaining to economy, but just employment in general. And as we're still living and working through this time of COVID-19, that many of the immigrant community are working as frontline essential workers too. And so they've played a really critical role in helping to keep our economy going and to maintain some sort of infrastructure for us while living through the pandemic.
Talking about how my parents are both business owners and they are immigrants. So my dad came here as a refugee. He has a trucking business where he helps folks that like basically are just now coming to the country or have a financial limitation to get their CDL. So he helps them get their CDL and then train them and they are now on a payroll service where they work for him. And my mom, she went through a hard process of getting her green card. She's a green card holder now, but she has a hair salon, an African hair braiding shop here in Greensboro, where she hires folks from the community as well, especially women that are basically the turn in the line is taking too long. So they are they basically don't have the necessary papers to go and get the American jobs. And that's what I've heard them say so many times, like, oh, I want an American job, but I can't, so I'm gonna be here and braid hair. But it's helping them provide for their family here and also back in their home country. So definitely this is helping the economy because they're both taxpayers. They're paying taxes to the government, payroll or income taxes. So yeah, definitely immigrants are very like basically economic, like they're boosting the economy. But this is not being heard of, or people don't normally talk about it. Yeah.
I feel like the immigrant community is often a scapegoat in economic conversations, that a lot of blame is laid at the feet of that community, and sort of diverted rather than, actually looking at the facts of what the immigrant community contributes to the economy. So yeah, not only does your mom contribute by paying the taxes and payroll taxes and things like that, but by giving other people in the community an opportunity for economic advancement, she's elevating the entire community as a whole. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. What has been the impact of COVID-19 on the immigrant community, and maybe what are some of the specific challenges for that community to access information and vaccines?
I think at the beginning of the pandemic, there was this notion that, COVID is the great equalizer and we're all in the same boat. And then when things started turning and things started happening and we realized who was on the front lines and who was more susceptible and who couldn't couldn't do their work remotely from the same comfort of home, it soon became clear that a lot of the folks who were getting infected with the virus and who were disproportionately affected were folks of color, folks from immigrant refugee communities, folks from historically marginalized communities, right? All the while, we're also, trying to manage a family, trying to, if they had children, trying to also navigate an education system that was now going to be fully remote. And so there were just barriers on top of barriers on top of barriers on top of barriers, and very few resources, very limited resources on how to be able to feel like they could survive this, because there wasn't any kind of support, very few supports from the government. And a lot of the times we were relying on nonprofits to kind of fill in that gap, relying on already the limited resources that we have at our different agencies to be able to fill in that gap that honestly wasn't probably supposed to be on us. This is an issue that was affecting everybody. And so I think there was a lot of frustration on all sides of how are we going to get through this? We are so limited. We are so, spread so thinly on all the other responsibilities that we have. And so to put a pandemic on top of it was already overwhelming. So I think that we are coming better to terms. I'm happy that the misconception there of, that the pandemic is affecting all of us equally is now being disrupted, and the narrative is actually, wait, there were already social determinants that were making it difficult, painting the picture and really showing it as it is.
Right.
Reiterate everything Foon said. All of that. I would also say, on kind of more of a slightly positive note, I think we've seen a lot of leaders within different refugee and immigrant communities really just show tremendous leadership in how they're responding to the pandemic and how it's affecting their respective communities, which I think has been really, really incredible. I know of, a handful of things, of, masks being issued and food being issued to, members of their community, like different food drives and things being put together and organized by refugee and immigrant leaders. Also just trying to make information more accessible, whether it's putting information like information together via social media or flyers, or even creating videos in different languages to be able to share with community members so they have the information, they know how to protect themselves, they know what to look for, even resources about the vaccine as well. So I think on the flip side, it's been really tremendous to see cases. I think folks just kind of had to take that in their own hands, but it's still been a positive, I think, to see just all of the tremendous leadership that's come out of it.
Well, like when you look at now, like the news and the violence that is basically affecting like the Asian community, you kind of notice like the trends when COVID first came out, basically with the thought of COVID originating from China. And the pushback that was put like basically against the Asian community from the start of COVID. And during like the quarantine and not being able to travel, like the restrictions and such, put a lot of people in the shoes of like immigrants and what some immigrants are having to go through. So just bringing to light like the realization that COVID has brought to a lot of people, and also some of the problems that it also raised in the immigrant community. So just basically shifting from that to folks that are being detained in detention centers. They are not being paid attention to as far in terms of COVID vaccine or masks and PPE equipment. So Fune and I had the wonderful pleasure of presenting to Representative Kathy Manning last week, and basically raising this this up. Like, these folks are being detained. We need to prioritize the immigrant community, but we are not looking at the folks that are in like Stewart Detention Center, where there have been 500 cases reported of COVID there, and 4 of them have passed away. And there have been a total of 10,000 COVID cases that have been reported in all of these, like nationally in the detention centers. And this is like, these numbers are growing daily, but like nobody's talking about basically getting them equipment that they need, because these are privately owned. So yeah, just wanted to bring that up of how like COVID is affecting the immigrant community in different ways.
The COVID has caused a lot of delays. So delays in green cards and things like that, because obviously USCIS, which processes immigration, has been impacted by COVID as well. There have been delays in doing biometrics, like doing fingerprints, because of COVID restrictions. And so there's a big backlog of green cards and things like that. And then likewise for family petitions, there's also a backlog because embassies around the world have been shut down or working at like limited capacity. And so the impact has just been big delays.
Yeah. What your biggest challenges have been and what your biggest sources for joy or inspiration have been. So Betsy, would you like to start?
Sure. I'm going to go back to my time at Elon for my biggest challenges, because as I said earlier, I started working during the Trump administration, and we did a lot of refugee follow to join, and a big part of my job was talking with family members who were waiting to be reunited with their children or their spouse, and having to give them updates, and there just were never updates. And so I had one client who was, an older mother who had her youngest child, who's a 16-year-old girl, left in the refugee camp by herself. And she was just desperate. It was impacting her health, her worry for her child. And so I would say the flip side of that is the few family reunifications I was able to see. It was just it was like balm for your soul, you know, when a family member would arrive, and it's always it's a gift that they encourage us, like, yes, please come to the airport and meet my family member, and so we're able to see that reunification, and there is hopefully a light at the end for all of these people, and yeah.
I would say similarly to Betsy's response, that I think one of the biggest challenges for us too, and for me personally, has just been seeing so many families separated with really without any sort of resolution or kind of end in sight. It's just caused so much stress and anxiety for individuals, understandably so. The biggest challenge has been trying to overcome all of the, you know, anti-immigrant policies that have come from the federal level over the past few years, and trying to maintain some sort of infrastructure and services for when there was going to be that change in administration. So it's not even just a matter about those, you know, coming, but those who are here, and being able to maintain some sort of capacity to continue to serve people has definitely been one of probably the biggest challenge to work through. And but, you know, being able to get through the past 4 years successfully, and like keep our doors open and keep staff members who really care so much about this work, I feel really fortunate for that. I would say what gives me the most hope and makes me just love this work so much, and love working with immigrant and refugee communities, has just been being able to witness all of those big life milestones, you know, kind of at different points in their life, whether it's buying their first home or getting U.S. citizenship, or seeing kids graduate high school and go to college. You know, all of that makes it so worth it. And for as cheesy as it sounds, I really believe in the American dream and like what is possible. And I think that, you know, it's giving people the opportunity that might never have otherwise had the opportunity to like live a safe life with access to things. And, you know, there's still things that can be done better, and seeing people kind of be able to take advantage of opportunities and really have meaningful lives that, like I said, maybe they otherwise wouldn't be able to.
Right.
One of the biggest challenges that FaithAction and like myself and my colleagues have faced is just, repeating what everyone else has said, it's just kind of watching community members endure trauma and go through already such difficult conditions, and then have to go through so much more. And it is really difficult to kind of, you know, hear stories, and then can only do so much to support. And it's hard to feel, I think sometimes it's hard to draw boundaries in this work. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult to not feel burnt out or not feel kind of overwhelmed by the emotional labor it takes to, you know, be in this line of work. And that's difficult. And I think in that, it's a reminder that regardless of what administration is here, regardless of where we are, there's always going to be work to be done, and there's always going to be community support, and that we need to check up on each other. We need to give each other grace and space. And I'm trying to feel less guilty about taking time away from my computer whole and eat a meal and just, you know, experience my time, because we can't, you know, fill from an empty cup, and we can't do this work if we are already so emotionally drained and mentally drained, physically drained. And so I think it's also been a good reminder as well to take care of myself, so that I can do this work even better and support my community members even better.
Challenges is like stories of trauma, just basically seeing how either the past presidential administration or COVID has affected members it weighs on your soul when you're passionate about this work. While I was interning at NC African Services Coalition, I met a refugee from Rwanda who was separated from her children. And some of her children weren't even in line yet to basically come here. But she was affected by the two factors, COVID and the previous administration, where her entire family, she didn't know when her other kids will even be approved to come here. And her other kids that were approved, so if they were supposed, she was supposed to come here on March 13th, and her other kids were supposed to come here on the 14th, on March 14th. And the moment she came, March 14th, everything shut down due to COVID. And I could just feel her pain. She's just like, I don't know when this COVID is gonna be over for my kids to come here, and I don't know when my other kids will even have the opportunity to come here. So that was a challenge, just because I was just like, what can I do? Like, there wasn't really anything that I could use my hands or my resources, like my personal self, to basically do for her. So it was a big challenge on me. It was just like the whole week, I just couldn't, like, it was just so sad for me to just hear that, because my dad came here as a refugee in 2000 in the year 2000, and I was separated from him for 8 years. And then I was later on came and joined him. So just remembering how that was, and trying to put myself in the shoes of her children and what they must be going through. But a source of like inspiration for me right now is the hope of like basically the new administration and also the vaccines. So basically getting vaccinated and get the balls rolling with these like the governmental agencies, and trying to get them to process these things. And also the numbers of refugees being raised. Yeah, so definitely that was a challenge, and that continues to be a challenge. Because it wasn't the first time. I know that it's not going to be the first time that I'm going to hear something like that in the work that I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I would definitely encourage anyone who feels compelled to, support immigration pathways that exist, or promote new ones, so that it is more accessible and equitable, to reach out to your elected officials, senators, state representatives. I think even locally, some of our elected officials have been, very supportive of our immigrant and refugee communities. And so everyone's voice is really important. And, the more our government hears from citizens about their concerns and their support for certain causes, the more inclined they are to respond. So I would just really encourage that if you found any of this compelling, to please, raise your voice and advocate for change.